Mom saw strange stains on her daughter's sheets. That evening, she heard her husband's voice from the kids' room saying, "Don't tell Mom." And when she walked in, she turned pale. In a quiet English-speaking town, where the streets were paved with cobblestones and the sky was painted with pastel shades of sunset every evening, lived Jennifer and her daughter Tiffany. Their house was modest, 2 stories with climbing roses at the doorstep and a small garden in the backyard. It had become their haven 10 years ago, when Tiffany's father unexpectedly left them. Since then, Jennifer had taken on the role of both parents. Her strictness was legendary in the neighborhood. She believed that only clear rules and expectations could ensure a secure future for Tiffany. Without order, there is no progress. She often repeated while checking Tiffany's homework every evening to ensure it was done flawlessly. Tiffany, being a teenager, had already begun to show traits of independence, which often led to arguments with her mother. At school, she was an excellent student, but after classes, she preferred the company of kids who played soccer on the old field beyond the railroad tracks. There, she could be herself without fearing her mother's strict gaze. "Tiffany, you need to be more ladylike. You're growing up," Jennifer would say when she came home with scraped knees and dusty clothes. But Tiffany would just smile back, fully understanding that her mother was simply more worried about her than she could express in words. Years of loneliness had made Jennifer not only strict, but also extraordinarily self-reliant. She worked as an accountant in a local firm, and her colleagues respected her for her professionalism and ability to solve complex problems under pressure. But at home, sitting at the old wooden table in the kitchen, she often pondered her life, gazing at photos of happier times when she and Tiffany's father were together. On those evenings when Tiffany fell asleep, Jennifer sometimes allowed herself to dream. She imagined meeting someone special who could bring laughter and joy into their home. But then she would quickly dismiss those thoughts, reminding herself of the importance of stability and security. No time for foolishness, she would chide herself, returning to reality. Tiffany sensed that her mother was depriving herself of something for her daughter's sake, and often persuaded her to go on a date or at least have lunch with her coworkers. "Mom, you deserve happiness," she would say, but Jennifer would only smile in return and change the subject. In the amber light of early morning, which filtered through the large office windows, Jennifer sat at her desk, buried in papers and numbers. Her life seemed to consist of endless spreadsheets and reports. However, that day, the routine of her office world was disrupted by the unexpected arrival of a new employee who was to bring fresh ideas to their firm's legal department. Lyon, the new lawyer, entered the office with a confident smile and a handshake that was firm enough to express determination, but gentle enough not to seem aggressive. His dark hair was neatly combed back, and his eyes were so bright blue that they seemed to reflect the sky outside the window. Despite her usual reserve, Jennifer couldn't help but notice his presence. When he approached her desk to introduce himself, she felt unusually flustered. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. It's a pleasure to meet you." "I've heard great things about your work," he said with a smile. From that moment, their acquaintance began. Lyon often lingered by her desk, discussing not only business matters, but also everyday trivia. He was interested in her opinions on the latest books and movies, and inevitably their conversations often extended beyond the end of the workday. Gradually, Jennifer realized that she looked forward to these moments more than anything else in her orderly life. Lyon managed to make her laugh, something that hadn't happened for many years. His wit and ease of conversation broke through her habitual strictness, and she began to feel young and carefree again, like in those distant times before her heavy loss. One day, Lyon invited Jennifer to lunch. They chose a small cafe near the office where they could talk more freely, not confined by office walls. The transition from formal topics to personal stories happened naturally. Jennifer shared her life story, talking about Tiffany and how difficult it had been raising her alone. Lyon listened attentively, not interrupting, and when she finished, he quietly said, "You are a very strong woman, Jennifer. Tiffany is lucky to have a mother like you." His words touched her deeply. For the first time in many years, she felt not only the weight of responsibility, but also pride in her accomplishments. From that day on, their bond only grew stronger. Lion supported Jennifer not just as a colleague, but also as a friend who could come to her aid at any moment. His warmth and care gradually dissolved the wall that Jennifer had built around her heart. One evening, standing at her doorstep, Lion gently took her hands, and Jennifer realized she was ready to open her heart to a new chapter in her life. Their eyes met, and at that moment, it seemed as if the whole world stopped. Lion softly asked, "May I hope to be a part of your life, not just as a friend?" Her answer was quiet but confident, "Yes." The summer breeze played with the leaves of the old oaks framing the cozy backyard of the small house, where Jennifer and Lion decided to tie their destinies together. The sun, filtering through the branches, created patches of light and shadow on the ground, as if nature itself had decided to decorate this celebration. Everything was organized simply but tastefully. White chairs for the guests were arranged in a semicircle, and in the center, on an improvised altar, a vintage wooden table adorned with wildflowers and greenery. In the background, soft music played, classical melodies that Lion loved so much. Guests began to gather, exchanging warm smiles and whispering greetings. Among them were co-workers, longtime friends, and of course, relatives who had come to support Jennifer and Lion on this momentous day. Tiffany stood aside, watching the preparations. She wore a delicate sky blue dress that harmonized with her youth and freshness. "You look stunning, Mom," she said, approaching Jennifer, who was checking her reflection in the mirror one last time. "Thank you, dear," Jennifer replied, smiling and hugging her daughter. "I'm so happy you're here with me. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Lion is a wonderful man." "You deserve happiness," Tiffany said, her eyes glistening with happiness and a bit of fear for the unknown future. "I know, sweetheart. I feel this is right," Jennifer said softly, stroking her daughter's hand. Her eyes showed determination and calmness born from deep confidence in her choice. When the ceremony began, Lion approached the altar, his gaze fixed on Jennifer, who slowly walked toward him down the aisle between the chairs. His eyes were filled with love and admiration. Jennifer, in her elegant white dress, beamed with happiness, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. The minister standing before them began the ceremony with traditional words, but soon moved to more personal, heartfelt words about love, written especially for Jennifer and Lion. "Love is not just a feeling, it's a decision, a commitment we renew every day," he said, looking from the groom to the bride. "Jennifer and Lion, are you ready to make promises to each other that will serve as the foundation for your new journey together?" the minister asked when it was time to exchange vows. "I'm ready," Lion said firmly, taking Jennifer's hands in his. "And I'm ready too," Jennifer replied, her voice trembling with emotion. The exchange of rings was a moment of pure magic, filled with laughter and tears of joy. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant concluded, and at that moment, the bells began heralding the start of a new chapter in their lives. The wedding continued into the late evening with dancing and singing, speeches and toasts that spoke of hopes and dreams, a future full of love and happiness. "To your happiness," the guests toasted, raising their glasses to the newlyweds. The morning after the wedding, Jennifer and Lion were pleasantly surprised to find Tiffany in the kitchen, enthusiastically preparing breakfast. She was stirring the eggs with such gusto that they almost spilled out of the pan. "So, today I'm taking on my duties as sous chef," Tiffany declared as they walked in. "Mom, you're the guest today." Lion was tasked with cutting up fruit, and his attempts to carve an apple into a swan looked more like a clumsy frog. "What's this you're making, Lion? A new type of amphibian?" Tiffany asked with a laugh, winking at her mom. Lion, unfazed, replied, "It's an exclusive species that you can only see here in the Thompson kitchen." Laughter filled the kitchen as breakfast continued in a light and playful mood. It was a new beginning for everyone, and Lion did his best to bond with Tiffany, knowing he needed to earn her trust. One evening, Lion suggested watching an old comedy. "In my opinion, this is the funniest comedy of all time," he declared, settling onto the couch with a huge bowl of popcorn. "Challenge accepted," Tiffany replied with a smile, sitting down next to him. The film turned out to be hilarious, and soon Tiffany couldn't stop laughing. "All right, you won this round, Lion, but be ready for a rematch." The next day, Tiffany suggested they play badminton in the backyard. "Aren't you up for a little exercise?" she challenged, handing Lion a racket. "Tiffany, I was the school badminton champion," Lion said seriously, though in reality, it had been 10 years since he last held a racket. The game was full of laughter and friendly jabs, and Lion accidentally sent a few shuttlecocks into the neighbor's yard. "Well, old man, maybe you should join a chess club?" Tiffany teased as they searched for another lost shuttlecock. With each passing day, their relationship grew warmer and more friendly. Lion didn't try to replace her father, but became the adult friend who was always there to support, lift her spirits, or just help with homework. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together, Tiffany suddenly said seriously, "You know, Lion, I'm glad you're here. You're a good person." Lion smiled, hugging her shoulders. "Thanks, Tiffany. I'm really happy to be part of this family." Step by step, with kindness and humor, Lion and Tiffany built their relationship, filling the house with new joys and warm memories. But all good things ended as quickly as they began. The shadows began to lengthen from the trees as autumn took hold. The house, once filled with laughter and joyful shouts, seemed noticeably dimmer. Tiffany, always so energetic and open, had become withdrawn and quiet. Her gaze often wandered into the void, as if she was seeing something invisible to others. At first, Jennifer attributed this to the teenage crisis. After all, who wasn't mysterious and misunderstood at 15? But over time, the mother began to notice that her daughter was spending more and more time away from home. "Where are you going?" Jennifer asked one morning when Tiffany seemed ready to leave without explanation. "Just going out for a walk," Tiffany replied curtly, avoiding eye contact with her mother. "Tiffany, we always talk to each other. What's going on?" Jennifer insisted, but the door slammed behind her daughter before an answer could come. Nights became a time of anxiety for Jennifer. She tossed and turned in bed, listening for every rustle, waiting for Tiffany to come home. The hours stubbornly ticked toward morning, and her daughter was still not back. Lion, trying to support his wife, said maybe she's just found new friends. "You know, it's normal for her age. New friends who keep her out until 3 in the morning?" Jennifer replied with irony, feeling a growing sense of unease. One morning, when Tiffany finally came home just before dawn, she seemed truly alien to Jennifer. There was a darkness in her daughter's eyes, deeper than the usual teenage melancholy. Her clothes were torn and dirty, as if she had run through the woods. "Tiffany, are you okay?" Jennifer asked anxiously, but the response was only a silent nod. These nocturnal disappearances became regular. Tiffany returned home later and later, and her behavior grew more mysterious. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Lion, no longer able to hide his concern, said maybe we should talk to her like an adult, find out what's really troubling her. Jennifer, feeling a deep fear that something serious was wrong with her daughter, silently nodded. But when they went up to Tiffany's room, the door was locked, and through it came whispers and sighs, as if the girl was talking to someone who couldn't be seen. "Tiffany, open up, it's us," Jennifer said softly, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. After a moment, the door slowly creaked open. There was no one in the room except Tiffany. Her face wore a mask of indifference, and when she said, "I need to go to bed, sorry," her mother felt a chill of fear running down her spine. Night after night, as Tiffany went into her room, the door would lock behind her, and Jennifer and Lion would remain outside, listening to the silence that seemed louder than any words. Jennifer was packing for a business trip. Worry about Tiffany wouldn't leave her mind. The girl continued to act strangely, and her mother acutely felt she was leaving the house at a difficult time. Lion stood in the bedroom doorway, watching her fuss. "Are you sure you need to go?" he asked, trying to mask the anxiety in his voice. "Yes, it's important for work, but I'll call every day." "Please take care of Tiffany," Jennifer replied, trying to catch her daughter's eye, who sat silently at breakfast, lost in her own thoughts. When it was time to say goodbye, Jennifer hugged Tiffany, trying to convey all her love and care through that brief touch. "Be good, okay," she said softly, but Tiffany merely nodded, avoiding eye contact. After leaving, Jennifer felt torn between her duties and the maternal instinct that screamed at her to come back. In her hotel room, she tried several times to call home, but the calls went unanswered. The phone screen seemed to be a dark ocean of silence. Lion, left alone with Tiffany, struggled to connect with the increasingly distant girl. He suggested going to the movies or having ice cream, but Tiffany burst off his attempts to brighten her days. Her responses were short and detached, and Lion felt a wall of misunderstanding growing between them. "Tiffany, talk to me. What's bothering you? You know you can trust me," he tried one evening when they were alone in the living room. Tiffany stared at him silently, her eyes looking hazy and distant. "I'm just bored," she finally said, and quickly went to her room, leaving Lion sitting in confusion. Over the week, Lion repeatedly tried to reach out to Tiffany, but all his attempts went nowhere. The evenings were filled with a silence that grew thicker and heavier. He updated Jennifer on his failed conversations, and his words only deepened her worry. "Keep me posted. I need to know she's okay," she asked in every call, and Lion nodded, even though he knew reassuring news was far from the truth. After a stressful business meeting on her trip, Jennifer decided to join her colleagues at a bar to relax and take her mind off work. In the dimly lit bar, where soft music created a soothing atmosphere, she found a moment to share her worries about family issues. "I just don't know what to think," she began, addressing her colleagues as they sat around a table with cocktails in hand. "On one hand, Lion has always been great, but the situation with Tiffany, it's all so confusing." One of her colleagues, Susan, known for her tendency to dramatize any situation, quickly jumped into the conversation. "Oh, Jennifer, but you know how these men can be. Maybe Lion isn't as innocent as he seems." Jennifer frowned, listening carefully to Susan. "Well, I'm not sure that's true. Lion has always been supportive, but you've heard the stories, haven't you? When they start hiding things, it usually doesn't end well. I don't want to scare you, but maybe it's worth digging a little deeper." Susan persisted, clearly enjoying the chance to stir up drama. Another colleague, Mark, who had been silent up to that point, intervened, trying to bring reason into the discussion. "Susan, let's not jump to conclusions. Jennifer, you know Lion and your situation best. Maybe there's a simple explanation for everything that's going on." Jennifer nodded, thanking Mark for his words. "Yes, you're right. I need to talk to Lion, openly and honestly. We've always been able to resolve issues through dialogue." The evening continued, but Susan's comments left seeds of doubt in Jennifer's heart. She decided that upon returning home, she would need to have a serious talk with Lion. Not to accuse him baselessly, but to ensure everything was all right between them. That bar conversation reminded her of how crucial trust is in a relationship, and how easily it can be shaken by external pressures and conjecture. Finally, upon returning home, Jennifer found the house strangely empty and quiet. Tiffany was not home, and Lion sat in the kitchen, lost in thought. "She's gone out again, without saying where," he said, noticing the question in Jennifer's eyes. Jennifer felt a cold grip on her heart. Tiffany had never been this withdrawn and distant before. What had happened to her daughter? What secrets lay behind her silence? These questions hung in the air, thickening the atmosphere with anxious foreboding. When Jennifer walked into the house after a week away, the atmosphere of silent tension hit her immediately. The expected relief of being home was replaced by an uneasy premonition. Lion greeted her at the door with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. The gaze that was usually warm and welcoming now looked troubled and tired. "Hi, how was the trip?" he asked, his voice sounding a bit restrained, as if he was weighing each word. "Good, but I'm so glad to be home," Jennifer replied, hugging him. She kissed him on the cheek, but her attention was fixed on the door leading to Tiffany's room. "Where's Tiffany?" "She's in her room." Lion seemed reluctant to share details, his eyes evasively wandering. Jennifer felt a chill running down her spine. She left her suitcase by the door and headed toward her daughter's room, but Lion stopped her, touching her hand. "Jenny, let's talk first. There's something you need to know." They sat in the living room, where every object seemed to witness the past days of tension. Lion explained how Tiffany had been leaving the house without explanation and returning only in the early morning. How he had tried to talk to her, but she would shut down, rejecting attempts to connect. "I really don't know what's going on, Jenny. Her behavior is changing so suddenly. It's not like her." Lion looked helpless and worried. Jennifer suddenly realized how much they might have missed, caught up in their work responsibilities and new marriage. She stood up, feeling the rising anxiety inside. I'll talk to her. Tiffany's room was dimly lit, the curtains tightly drawn, blocking out the spring light. Jennifer knocked and gently entered. Tiffany lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and it seemed she didn't hear the door opening. Tiffany, her mother called softly. The girl slowly turned her head, and Jennifer saw a vacant look in her daughter's eyes. Mom, she whispered, and there was an exhaustion in her voice that Jennifer couldn't ignore. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Please talk to me, Jennifer said, sitting on the edge of the bed and carefully taking her daughter's hand. Tiffany flinched but didn't pull away. Just hard days, Mom, Tiffany said, and her voice sounded almost pleading. Jennifer hugged her, feeling her daughter tremble slightly. We'll get through this together, okay? You can trust me. After returning home, Jennifer felt an unbearable tension in the house. The anxiety she had experienced during her absence hadn't eased, and the discoveries in the laundry only fueled her worry. One morning, while sorting the laundry, Jennifer noticed strange stains on one of Tiffany's sheets. They were small, but clearly bloodstains. Suddenly, she felt an icy chill envelop her heart. Where did this blood come from? Tiffany didn't mention any injuries, she thought, her mind racing through possible scenarios. Jennifer carefully washed the sheets separately, trying to hide her concern from Mayan and Tiffany. Deep down, she began to suspect that Mayan might be involved in whatever was happening with Tiffany. His behavior lately had become more withdrawn, and sometimes it seemed like he was avoiding direct eye contact. That evening, when Mayan went out to the store, Jennifer decided to talk to Tiffany. She approached her daughter's room and knocked on the door. Tiffany, can we talk? She asked gently. Tiffany opened the door, her face closed off and unreadable. Sure, Mom, she said, stepping aside to let Jennifer in. Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed next to her daughter. Tiffany, I found blood on your sheet. Are you okay? If someone threatening you, she started cautiously watching her daughter's reaction. Tiffany shook her head, her eyes filled with concern. No, Mom, I'm fine. I just cut myself by accident. Don't worry about it, she said quickly, but her voice was trembling. Jennifer scrutinized her daughter's face, trying to gauge whether she was telling the truth. Are you sure? If there's something you want to tell me, I'm here to protect you, no matter what. Tiffany quickly hugged her mother as if to reassure her. Yes, Mom, I'm sure. It was just an unlucky day, she whispered. In the early morning, Jennifer, as usual, kissed Lion and Tiffany goodbye, but instead of heading to work, she secretly took the keys to the second car. She drove a few blocks away, then carefully parked the car around the corner, where it wouldn't be visible from their house, but where she could observe arrivals and departures. Jennifer's heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear, blended with a determination to uncover the truth. She couldn't shake the thought that Lion, the man she loved and trusted with her family, might be involved in something unacceptable. She tried to convince herself that her suspicions were unfounded, but her intuition suggested otherwise. Less than an hour later, the doors of her house opened. Jennifer grabbed her binoculars and focused them on the house. Her breath caught when she saw Lion and Tiffany leaving the house and getting into a car. Where could they be going at this early hour? Flashed through her mind. Deciding it was time to act, Jennifer started her car and followed them at a safe distance. Her mind was swirling with various scenarios, and she struggled to keep her emotions in check. Leon's car turned toward a park on the outskirts of town, and Jennifer parked her car a little distance away. She waited a few minutes before following them. Lion and Tiffany walked side by side, and nothing in their behavior revealed any obvious closeness or inappropriate conduct. However, the uncertainty and growing anger pushed Jennifer to act. She quickly approached them as they stopped by a bench. What's going on here? She asked loudly, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Lion and Tiffany turned in surprise. Jennifer, what are you doing here? Lion asked, his voice sounding bewildered. Don't act like you don't know. What are you doing here together so early? She shouted, unable to contain her anger. Tiffany, blushing, stepped between them. Mom, you don't understand. We're just... Without letting her finish, Jennifer rushed at Lion, accusing him of the worst possible sins. Are you sleeping with my daughter? Answer me. Her voice was filled with desperation and rage. Lion raised his hands in a defensive gesture, trying to calm her down. Jenny, you need to calm down. This isn't what you think. We're just... Enough. Jennifer interrupted him, shoving him away. She demanded explanations, every part of her ready to fight for the truth, despite the storm of emotions tearing her apart inside. As she attacked Lan, her blows were blind and chaotic. Leon, trying to protect himself, shielded with his hands and backed away. But when one of Jennifer's strikes landed directly on his face, the situation changed. Leon grabbed her by the wrists, looked at her fiercely, and tightly squeezed her hands, trying to stop her. Enough, Jennifer. His voice was firm and resolute. Tiffany and I are in a serious situation, and we're heading to the police station. This is important. Jennifer, meeting his gaze, which held no hint of deceit, slowly began to calm down. Tears mingled with sweat on her cheeks as she realized she might have been wrong about her suspicions. Her gaze, filled with fear and confusion, shifted to Tiffany, who stood nearby, pale and frightened. Feeling the weight of the moment, Tiffany gently touched her mother's hand. "Mom, please wait for us in the car. We'll explain everything when we get back. Just wait, please." Jennifer nodded, feeling the pressure and tension starting to lift. She slowly released Lion's hands and, turning around, headed for the car. As she sat inside, she tried to collect herself, breathing in the cool air of the park, which now seemed far from peaceful. In the car, waiting for Tiffany and Lion's return, Jennifer tried to sort out her thoughts. Emotions still churned inside her, but the realization that she might have been wrong made her feel guilty. Doubts and anxiety filled every corner of her mind, as she awaited Tiffany and Lion's return to learn the whole truth about what was happening. When Lion and Tiffany returned to the car, the mood was tense. Lion quietly took the driver's seat, and Tiffany sat in the passenger seat next to him. The car was filled with silence, broken only by the sounds of closing doors and the click of seatbelts. Tiffany pulled out a first aid kit from the glove compartment and began carefully treating the scratches and bruises on Lion's face. He sat silently, wincing occasionally as the antiseptic stung his open wounds. Jennifer remained silent, gripping her purse tightly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, but her thoughts were clearly far away. After Tiffany finished treating the wounds and put away the first aid kit, she turned to her mother. Her eyes were full of disappointment. "Mom, how could you even think that about Lion and me?" Her voice trembled with emotion, each word weighed down with gravity. Lion, who had been silent until then, also cast Jennifer a disapproving look. In response, Jennifer, who had been silent up to that point, couldn't hold back any longer. "Everything pointed to it," she exclaimed, raising her voice. "You've become distant, our relationship has worsened, and then I found blood on the sheets. What was I supposed to think?" Jennifer's voice grew louder. She couldn't control her emotions. With each word, her accusations became more insistent, and she began to shout, unable to cope with the accumulated tension. Leon, who had been trying to stay calm, intervened when he saw the situation spiraling out of control. "Jennifer, please calm down," he said, firmly but calmly. "Let's get home, and we'll discuss everything there. This isn't the place or the time for this conversation." After his words, a heavy silence fell over the car. Jennifer struggled to hold back tears while Tiffany stared out the window, trying to hide her disappointment and hurt. Lion concentrated on the road, taking deep breaths, trying to keep his emotions in check. The rest of the drive was spent in silence. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts, reflecting on what had happened and trying to figure out how to resolve the conflict that had flared up so unexpectedly. The drive home seemed endless, and the silence was loud, filled with unspoken words and feelings that needed to be addressed. Returning home in tense silence, each person mentally ran through scenarios of how the situation would resolve. When they entered the living room, Jennifer gestured for Tiffany to sit down. Lion closed the door behind them, preparing for a serious discussion. Tiffany gathered her courage, knowing she had to reveal the full extent of what had happened to her mother. "Mom, I need to explain everything. The past few months have been really difficult, and I didn't know how to tell you. We've been spending a lot of time in the park with friends, and it started out quite innocently. But one group began threatening us, and things gradually got out of hand." She began trying to keep her emotions in check. Jennifer listened intently, struggling to stay calm despite her growing anxiety. What exactly happened, Tiffany? One evening, they approached us again. They started taunting and pushing us, and soon it turned into a fight. Jacob tried to protect us, and during the scuffle, he accidentally pushed one of them. The guy fell and hit his head on the curb. His name was Yusuf, the son of a wealthy man with a dubious reputation. Tiffany paused, her eyes full of fear. After the fight, I was scared, not just for myself, but for Jacob too. He was in shock and badly hurt, she continued, gathering her thoughts. I couldn't take him to the hospital. I was afraid they'd start asking questions and make everything worse. So I brought him here, home. Listening to her daughter, Jennifer felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear for what had happened, and relief that Tiffany had the presence of mind to make a quick decision. When Lion came home and saw Jacob, he was initially very frightened, but then we talked and decided we needed to act, Tiffany continued, glancing at Lion for support. And Yusuf is seriously hurt? Jennifer asked, feeling her heart pound faster. Yes, Mom, he's in the hospital and so is Jacob. And now we're all afraid that his father will want revenge. I hid Jacob at our place. He was covered in blood. That's why he stained the sheets and some other things. I didn't know what to do. Tiffany's voice trembled as she spoke, trying not to break down. Lion also intervened. When I found out, I wanted to tell you right away, Jennifer. But Tiffany convinced me it might make things worse if we weren't careful. I've already started looking into legal ways to protect Jacob and resolve this conflict, with minimal consequences for everyone. Jennifer was silent, processing the information. It was a lot for one conversation, and she felt the weight of responsibility for the next steps. We need to handle this very carefully, she finally said. Tiffany, you should have told me right away. Don't keep things like this from me in the future. But thank you for telling me now. We'll help Jacob. After everything that had happened, visiting Jacob in the hospital became not just an act of friendship for Tiffany, but a duty. She felt that her decision to hide her friend at home, although made with the best intentions, could lead to even bigger problems. Now that he was in the hospital and relatively safe, she decided to visit him to make sure he was okay and to offer moral support. The hospital was a place of contrasts, sterile, shiny corridors, and the smell of antiseptics mingled with quiet patient moans and weary smiles from the staff. Tiffany sighed as she walked through the automatic doors. She made her way to the reception desk, where she was given directions to Jacob's room. Walking past the patient rooms, Tiffany couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. If I had told Mom right away, this conflict might never have happened, she thought. But on the other hand, she knew she had acted based on the circumstances at the time. Arriving at Jacob's room, Tiffany knocked on the door and slowly entered. Jacob was lying in bed, his face pale, but his eyes lit up with a smile when he saw her. Hi, Tiffany, he said, his voice weak but cheerful. Hi, Jacob. How are you feeling? Tiffany approached the bed, gently taking his hand in hers. Better than I could be. The doctors say I'll recover soon. He tried to smile wider, but it was clear that every movement caused him pain. Tiffany sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. We've all been so worried about you. Jacob slightly squeezed her hand in return. Tiffany, you saved my life. If you hadn't helped me then, who knows what would have happened. I'll never forget it. Their conversation continued as they talked about school, friends, and how everything would impact their future lives. Tiffany told him about her talks with Mom and Lion and how they planned to protect him from potential consequences. Lion, as a lawyer, had already begun working on his case. They joked and laughed, trying to temporarily forget the challenges that awaited them outside. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by loud shouting and commotion coming from the hallway. What's that noise? Tiffany asked anxiously, trying to listen to the increasingly loud sounds. I don't know, but it sounds serious, Jacob replied, trying to sit up to peek out the window. But a sharp pain made him lie back down. Tiffany carefully approached the door and cracked it open to see what was happening in the hallway. The scene that greeted her was filled with chaos. Police officers were detaining 3 men who were shouting in an incomprehensible language. One of the officers was grappling with one of the men, trying to retrieve an object from his hiding place that seemed to be concealed. Understanding what she saw, Tiffany recoiled from the door, her heart freezing. It's a gun, Jacob. One of them had a gun, she whispered as she returned to his bedside, her eyes wide with fear. Jacob turned pale, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Tiffany, we need to stay here in the room." "Lock the door," he said quietly, trying to stay calm for her sake. Tiffany complied, quickly moving to the door and turning the key in the lock. As she was closing the curtains at the window, there were more loud shouts and sounds of a struggle before the corridor suddenly went silent. After several minutes of tense silence, there was a knock at the door. Tiffany cautiously asked who was there before peeking through the peephole. "Police, please open up. We want to make sure you're okay," came a confident voice from the other side of the door. Tiffany exchanged glances with Jacob, who nodded, indicating they could trust the voice. She slowly opened the door, and 2 uniformed police officers entered the room. "We apologize for the disturbance. There was a minor incident, but everything is under control now," one of the officers explained in a calm and assured tone. After the door closed behind the officers, Tiffany and Jacob remained in the room, each lost in their thoughts. Despite assurances that the situation was under control, the sense of danger still lingered in the air. Less than an hour later, Lion walked into the room. His face showed determination and a bit of relief. "I just spoke with my contacts in the police. I called them that night when the fight happened," he began, sitting down next to Tiffany. "They've been monitoring the Yusuf family for a while. Today's incident was the perfect opportunity for them to take action against them." Tiffany turned to Lion, her gaze filled with questions. "What are they going to do? It's dangerous to leave Jacob here if they're after him." Lion nodded, understanding her concern. "The police have a plan. They set up a sting right here in the hospital. When the hitmen came to take revenge, they were immediately arrested. The weapon was seized, and now it's a solid piece of evidence against Yusuf's father." Jacob, who had been listening to their conversation, suddenly laughed, breaking the tense silence. "I never thought I'd end up being the bait," he said, trying to mask his anxiety with a joke. Tiffany couldn't share his humor. "It's not funny, Jacob. Anything could have happened," she said seriously, gripping his hand tightly. Her eyes were filled with tears she was trying to hold back. The fear of losing her friend because of thoughtless actions weighed heavily on her heart. Lion patted her shoulder, trying to comfort her. "Everything turned out okay, Tiffany. Jacob is safe now, and the police have everything they need to put an end to this threat. We did everything we could to protect him." At that moment, 2 detectives entered the room, confirming Lion's words. They detailed how they had been tracking the Yusuf family's activities for some time, and how the current incident had finally allowed them to act decisively. One of the detectives, a middle-aged man with a serious face, addressed Tiffany and Jacob. "You both showed great bravery. Your courage and determination to help a friend led to us being able to prevent further violence." After the police left, Tiffany, Jacob, and Lion remained in the room, reflecting on what had happened. The relief that the danger had passed mixed with the realization of how easily things could have gone differently. As times became quieter, the consequences of those events began to become clear. Yusuf, who had recently left the hospital after his injury from the fight, faced new problems. By the time he recovered, his father had already been arrested, and Yusuf himself was charged with assault for his role in initiating the conflict. Meanwhile, Jacob had also recovered from his injuries and was preparing to be discharged from the hospital. Tiffany, overwhelmed with joy at his recovery, went to the hospital to pick him up. She arrived early, holding a bouquet of flowers, her heart filled with mixed emotions of joy and relief. Entering his room, she found Jacob already packing his things. His face lit up with a smile when he saw Tiffany. "Looks like someone's ready to get back to normal life," she said with handing him the flowers. Finally, Jacob replied, taking the bouquet. "I'm so glad this is behind us. I hope now things will settle down." At home, in an atmosphere filled with reflection and serious conversations, Lion and Jennifer discussed the events that had transpired. Sitting in the living room, they pondered the situation. "The police did a good job setting up the sting and arresting those attackers," Lion remarked, gazing into the fire. "They've been monitoring the Yusuf family for a long time, and this incident gave them the perfect reason to take action. Yes, it's a great chance for justice to restore order," Jennifer agreed. But I'm still worried about the kids. We need to do everything we can to protect them in the future. I agree, Lion nodded. We also need to make sure Tiffany and Jacob get the support they need. It might be a good idea to consult a professional counselor to help them deal with the trauma. They continued discussing how best to organize support and assistance for the young people. Meanwhile, Tiffany and Jacob were leaving the hospital, heading toward a new beginning under the clear autumn sky. They both felt grateful for each other's support and for having a family ready to help in any situation. The tough times were behind them, and ahead lay only recovery and a return to normal life. After all the trials and tribulations the Thompson family had faced, a day in the great outdoors was a well-deserved and enjoyable break. In the forest, where tall trees rustled their leaves, a picnic area had been set up, and the air was filled with the aroma of grilled meat. Lion, armed with skewers and a smile, was diligently grilling, as if it were his calling. I promise, no surprises today, just meat and marinade, he joked, flipping the pieces of meat on the grill. Tiffany spread out snacks and drinks on a large picnic table, and then called her friends. No fights today, okay? We're here for peace and barbecue, she warned them over the phone, causing laughter on the other end of the line. Jennifer, relieved from the stress of the past weeks, enjoyed watching the preparations. She spread a tablecloth and helped Tiffany, jokingly remarking, "If every family crisis ended with such a celebration, I'd start planning them monthly." When Tiffany's friends arrived, the atmosphere became even more festive. Stories of recent adventures mingled with jokes and laughter, and soon the forest was filled with the sounds of forest. The young people organized an impromptu badminton tournament, and Lion proudly joined in, declaring, "I'll show you how the old guard knows how to have fun." As the barbecue was ready, everyone gathered around the table. Lion, bringing a large platter of fragrant meat, announced, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the main dish of the day. No more drama, just meat." The meal proceeded in a joyful and relaxed atmosphere. Tiffany raised a toast to our family. No matter how tough things get, we always find a way to celebrate. After the toast, Jacob, who was also invited and feeling much better, added with a smile, "And remember, guys, if anyone wants to start a fight again, make sure it's in a video game. At least there, you can choose the difficulty level."